Think back to the day you got your college admission letter, the profound sense of relief, the deep sense of pride. You told yourself, once I get there, I'm going to build an incredible future. But then you actually arrive on campus, and a second silent voice wakes up inside your head. It says, you worked so hard to get here, you deserve to relax, enjoy life. You have plenty of time, so you listen. You intend to take a short break, but a short break turns into a semester turns into a year. Your days dissolve into mindless scrolling, late nights, and instant pleasure until one morning, maybe 12 or 24 months later, you wake up in a panic mode. Your goals haven't changed, but your time is disappearing. Suddenly, your brain hits the panic button. The same brain that encouraged you to relax is now demanding that you should act. Why does this happen? I am Professor Joseph. In my work in language and cognitive science, I look past the willpower myths to help students understand the actual neural mechanics behind this internal resistance. This shows that you are trapped in a frustrating paradox. The same brain that wants you to build a successful future is also pushing you toward immediate pleasure. When you try to study, guilt appears. You remember the time you have wasted, the opportunities you have ignored, and the guilt becomes so uncomfortable that you looked for relief. So you turn to the very distraction that created the guilt in the first place. If this feels like a losing battle, that's because you are experiencing a profound conflict inside your own mind. To understand it, let's briefly look at one of the most famous psychological frameworks ever proposed. Sigmund Freud's structural model of psyche. While Freud's ideas are theoretical concepts rather than literal brain structures, his model captures student dilemmas surprisingly well. Imagine a student sitting down to study for an important exam. One voice says, watch one more video, check your phone, you can study later. Freud called this the id, the part of the psyche that seeks immediate gratification or immediate pleasure. In today's world, social media, short videos, gaming, and endless entertainment provide exactly what the id wants. But another voice says, your exams are coming, your future depends on what you do today, get back to work. Freud called this the superego. It represents your ideals, standards, ambitions, and the person you want to become. Caught between these two forces, the ego, the conscious mind trying to navigate reality, the ego must constantly decide which voice to listen. When months or years pass without progress, a painful gap forms between who you are becoming and who you wanted to become. The larger the gap grows, the stronger the guilt becomes. Now, while Freud described this beautifully as a psychological drama, modern neuroscience gives us a biological perspective on the same conflict. When we talk about an internal war, it's tempting to imagine a battle between a rational brain and the primitive brain. But neuroscience suggests something more complex. The brain operates through interconnected systems that constantly communicate with one another. Even a simple decision whether to keep reading a textbook or check your phone involves multiple systems working simultaneously. Imagine you are studying for an important exam. You are reading a difficult chapter when your phone suddenly lights up. Instantly, part of your mind becomes curious and you start to think, who sent the message? Is it important? Is it something interesting? At the very same moment, another part of your mind is trying to keep your attention on the chapter because it understands the long-term value of learning the material. There isn't a single focus center fighting a single distraction center. Multiple systems are evaluating the situation at the same time. Some of these systems are heavily involved in planning, self-control, and thinking about future consequences. These are the functions associated with the prefrontal cortex. Other systems continuously evaluate rewards, emotions, and habits. Most of the time, these systems work together, but when immediate reward compete with long-term goals, they are not always aligned, and that conflict creates the experience we call temptation. To understand why that temptation can feel so powerful, we need to talk about one of the most misunderstood chemicals in neuroscience, that is the dopamine. The internet often describes dopamine as the brain's pleasure chemical, but that description is misleading. Dopamine is less about enjoyment and more about anticipation, motivation, and pursuit. It helps drive the urge to seek something that might be rewarding. Think about what happens when you unlock your phone. When you are unlocking the phone, you do not know what you will find. Maybe it's an interesting message. Maybe it's a funny video. Maybe it's not something special at all. That uncertainty is exactly what keeps people checking. The brain becomes interested before the reward arrives. The anticipation itself becomes powerful here. Digital platforms are exceptionally good at exploiting this system. Every swipe creates the possibility that something better is waiting just below the next post. As a result, your attention is constantly pulled toward immediate opportunities for reward. So when you try to focus on a difficult chapter or assignment, you are not simply fighting laziness, you are competing against technologies specifically designed to capture and hold human attention. But attraction alone does not explain why distraction keeps winning. For that, we need to look at how the brain manages energy. The brain behaves like what some scientists call a metabolic miser. Although it accounts for only about 2% of your body weight, it consumes roughly 20% of your energy. As a result, the brain is constantly searching for efficient paths. Deep learning is expensive. It requires concentration, self-control, and sustained mental effort. Scrolling through an app does not. Now imagine a student facing an important deadline. The guilt is building, stress levels are rising. Opening the textbook means confronting that discomfort. Opening an app offers immediate relief. And because the brain naturally prefers lower cost solutions, relief often wins. This is where the trap forms. Every time distractions become an escape from anxiety, the brain learns dangerous lesson. When I feel bad, distraction makes me feel better. The relief reinforces the habit, and the habit grows silently stronger. When this cycle repeats for months or years, something deeper begins to happen. At first, students tell themselves, I will start tomorrow. But after hundreds of failed attempts, confidence begins to erode. Psychologists call this phenomenon learned helplessness. You stop believing your actions can change the outcome. The problem is no longer procrastination. The problem becomes identity. You used to be motivated, but now you don't recognize yourself. A painful conflict emerges between your past self and your current behavior. The guilt becomes heavier, the anxiety becomes chronic, and eventually many students stop trying altogether. The habit loop becomes a cage, but there is an important detail many students never hear. The feeling that the lost control doesn't appear overnight. It is built through repetition. And anything built through repetition can be rebuilt in a different way. The same brain that built this cycle is capable of building a different one. The goal is not to become perfectly disciplined overnight. The goal is to make the next productive action slightly easier than the next distractions. Once you understand how the loop works, you can begin changing the conditions that keep alive, and that is where exit strategy begins. So how do you break a cycle that has both psychological and biological layers? The answer is not more willpower. For years, you blamed yourself for lacking discipline. But discipline was never the main problem. The problem was that distraction became easier than progress. The phone is always within reach. The escape routes are frictionless. And when stress, guilt, or anxiety appear, your brain naturally follows the path of least resistance. If distraction is easier than studying, distraction will usually win. So instead of trying to change your brain, change the environment. Move the phone away, block distracting apps, make distractions harder to access, and you just increase the effort required to escape into them. Give your long-term goals a fighting chance, because every time you remove the easiest path to distractions, you weaken the loop that has been holding you back. The goal is not to fight your brain. The goal is to understand how it works, because lasting satisfaction does not come from endlessly escaping discomfort. It comes from growth. It comes from competence. Understand the loop, rewrite the environment, and take back control of your future.